Welcome to this session looking at teaching languages at first level. There is another PowerPoint and video from teaching languages at early level, if you'd like to have a look at that as a bit of background. And I'm going to look at some of the same ideas, but also sort of show a bit of progression and look at some different areas as well. Okay, here are the aims of the session. So building on things we talked about last week and looking at how we might progress through first level, preparing pupils to go on to second level. If you've had a chance to already look at this video, that's great. And if not, you might like to pause the video now and watch this video of myself teaching and just have a think about what you like, what you might do differently, and if you have any questions. And it will just set the scene really for today's work. And we are going to try and focus on some cross-curricular work on space later on using these ideas. Here are some key questions that I want us to think about. We might not cover everything in today's session, but they're things for you to think about. And there is a Padlet where you can record your ideas and ask any questions. And if you're doing this session yourselves, you might like to pause the video and just have a chance to note down some ideas or discuss this with your colleagues. I think it's important to set the scene first of all and just think about what we expect learners to be able to do by the end of P4. And the expectations that I've noted here come from the document Building and Developing Language Skills, which has the outcomes for P1 all the way through to P7. And it's a nice document because it breaks it up by class. So you have a really good kind of overview of each class. The key things that I'd like to bring our awareness to is that we've got reading in here. So that's a big change from P1. And we're also, moving to looking at developing the skills in all four areas. So if we think a wee bit about progression in languages, so there's no linear progression and there's no right or wrong way of doing things, but we tend to focus predominantly on listening and talking in the early years and lower primary and move on to more reading and writing as the pupils go up through primary in second level. However, that doesn't mean that you can't introduce them earlier. And as I just said, there is an expectation that pupils will do reading from as early as P2. And that will just be reading keywords and sentences as they then get older. And we move from familiar to the unfamiliar. So they need to have a good understanding of pronunciation. As we would expect, listening and talking, not just greetings and instructions, but moving into simple conversations, okay? Generally based around themselves, so the basic information, name, age, birthday, etc. And then writing, again, looking at high frequency words, and this would be copying predominantly to start with, and then other phrases that they might already know with some support. As you can see, I've kind of got lots of lines, squiggly lines going round because everything is interconnected. If you're doing some talking with the learners, then they might want to write down their ideas or write first in preparation for talking. If the learners are doing some reading, the teacher might be reading to them and they might be following the text, so that would involve listening. And you might, for instance, get them to do a piece of reading and then follow up with some writing work. So as we can see, they're all linked. And we're really just putting in the building blocks for getting them to develop these skills. Now, I think it's really important at this stage to think a little bit about grammar or language structures. And there is a knowledge about language or KAL grid, which you can click on here to see this in more detail. Any course that you're using will have this built in already. So for you, it's just really a case of making sure that you are highlighting and bringing awareness to language structures It's not really about just teaching learners a list of words, on a topic, for instance, I don't know, pets. It's about getting the learners to be able to manipulate language, be able to use it for their own purposes, be able to identify structures and patterns, and then recreate these for their own self-expression. So to do that, one nice thing to do is to maybe get the learners to be language detectives and give them text to read or to listen to, and get them to spot the differences to English, the similarities. For instance, describing an animal, j'ai un lapin gris, where does the colour word go in the sentence? How is that the same or different to English? And the children will be able to spot these things, and you can do lots of good games with little matching cards, and it doesn't need to be, onerous, lengthy texts. So it's really important that we embrace language structures and not be scared of them, and bring a certain level of curiosity to it. And this is really important for developing language awareness in their own mother tongue. So if you're looking at adjectives or wow words in L1, then you can do this in L2. Same with looking at connectors. You can do this in L1 and then move to L2, or vice versa, go backwards. So teaching languages at first level, what might this look like? So hopefully by now, learners will be using languages for daily routines on quite a consistent basis. And that really is something we work hard on, perhaps at early level, all the way through primary, but the ground work is done in early, and then we build on this as they go through first, okay, and add to it as they get new language. You may well also have some discrete language lessons. This might be very short sections, like 10 minutes to introduce colours, for instance, or as they get older and go into, P4, you might be starting to do a little bit more at a time in preparation for them going into the second level, and perhaps having a bigger block of French at any one time. It's also really nice if we can include languages across the curriculum and look at IDL, predominantly making links with literacy, numeracy, and health and well-being, seeing as these are areas that are the responsibility of all. And they are focal points for early and first, all the way through to second, but in these first few years of primary, they're key. So I've got a few ideas here, but really making the links across different subject areas, bringing languages into whatever you're working on, and bringing whatever you're working on into languages. So there's a bit of both. For instance, if you're looking at colour mixing in expressive arts, then, why not bring the language in and look at what those different colours are in another language? Topic-based work, a lot of, and most of primary curriculum seems to be based around, covering a topic of some description. And so that can work alongside a language, or it can all be interrelated. So for instance, rainforest, if you're looking at animals in the rainforest, then you could teach your learners the animals in another language. And you can adapt whatever core language you're working on. So if your core language is looking at pets, instead of looking at pets, you could look at rainforest animals. It doesn't really matter too much, the exact vocabulary. It's much better really to make it all inclusive of what you're working on, and make those links and embed it in your topics. And then also not forgetting to celebrate languages, and that might be different things. Celebrate the culture of a country, or it might be to celebrate languages in terms of specific events at any point through the year, like European Day of Languages or Languages Week in February. Or it might be celebrating what your learners can do and sharing that learning with others, such as an assembly. So all these different things could be things that we would do at first level, also at early or at second, but as learners are becoming more confident in languages and more used to school, these are things maybe that we might not have done at early level that we could start to bring in. So I'll just put an example here of a progressive planner. This happens to be for French in power language schools, but any curriculum that you're working with, any resource that you're working with, will have a kind of a program of work of different topics that are covered in each year, and then what is included in each one of those different sort of areas, if you like. So this is just an overview. If you haven't got such a plan, I think it's useful to have one so that you're not just repeating language, but moving language forward and progressing, building on it and recycling language. So for instance, in P4, looking at uniform, you can revise colours in there, and also introduce new words for describing what it is you're actually wearing. So you're revising language and introducing new language. And obviously daily routines, classroom instructions would be embedded throughout. Okay. And if you click on the document, it will take you to the actual file, which is in the Highland Digital Hub. And we've got them for French or Gaelic. Okay, so developing all 4 skills. Now, games and a variety of activities, particularly active learning activities, are key at primary to make languages fun. And in the early PowerPoint, I've already talked about specific games that might be appropriate for early. As we get into first level, we can look at developing languages across all 4 skills, and sometimes individual skills, and sometimes bringing them all together. So I've put a couple on here. I think that show me boards are a fantastic thing that you can start to use, because it gives lots of options of getting children to draw things, but then also to write individual words and phrases. And the teacher can draw something on the board and the children can write it, or vice versa. And they can work in small groups. I really like to use post-it notes, particularly for writing, to build up sentences. And you can have post-it notes with individual words, keywords in English or in another language, and pictures, and then build up a phrase. For instance, a heart and some bananas might be j'aime les bananes. I have also put some games down here which would specifically look at reading, because I think that we need to be making sure that reading is fun at this age. And some of these are things you could do as the whole class, as I say, a warm-up, spot the mistake, separate the word, or, as a lengthier activity or as a homework activity, such as a word search, for instance. And there's lots of resources online to support that. Things like a class survey work really well to combine speaking and then writing, and also listening. And then you can also link it in with your numeracy. So there's loads of different ideas there. Okay, learning through challenges to develop language skills and knowledge. I just wanted to raise the awareness that there are different ways we can approach teaching languages. You can obviously introduce a topic, play some games and with the vocabulary, but then you could also turn it into a wee project and do something with it. And so these are just 3 different ones I wanted to profile. We've got on the Northern Alliance Family Learning site, we've got daily activities calendars for each month with suggested activities that you could try. And we've got, linking in with that, we've got a book here that links these ideas for language games and gives you suggestions for how you could link up with literacy and outdoor learning, and digital literacy. So using different apps to evidence and celebrate the learner's work. Alternatively, if you're doing Gaelic, you might want to look at the Gleans Challenge, where they're using, for instance, Twitter to encourage pupils to do spoken language, spoken Gaelic at school and at home, and share that. And there's a different challenge each term. And if you click each of these images, it will take you to a website with more information. So that's just a way really of parceling things up so that you can provide language learning within a wee project if you're interested. If you want to look at IDL, then Northern Alliance has some themed activity cards in a variety of languages, and these are relevant to a wide range of ages at primary school level. And we've given you some ideas for how you can go about that, introducing different language and then linking it with different activities which link in across the curriculum. Obviously, if you've got Power Language platform, Power Language schools rather, then you will have access to loads of topic-based resources on there. I just wanted to briefly look at an example of a cross-curricular project or a topic-based approach to work, looking at the topic of space. So this was done with a P2-3 class, and I'm just trying to show you here how the topic was space and then how French led into that. Okay, so the pupils were reading, the teacher was reading a book to the pupils, George's Secret Key to the Universe, and then that sort of triggered everything else, and all the work was based around the topic which linked to the book. And then the French was developed in coordination with that topic. So they revised numbers 1 to 10, looking at the different planets and numbering them. They looked at words for, meteorite and spaceship. And then they looked at revising their colours with the different planets. And then because in numeracy, they were looking at measuring things and whether things are big or small and ordering them, they then learned those words in French to describe the different planets. Okay, so there are some couple of tasks here that you can try yourself, okay? You can pause the video to have a wee go at this, and there are some different videos here. The links don't seem to be coming up immediately, but if you click on them, there are 2 images here, and then you can watch the videos and see if you can answer this question about how we could extend and develop the different skills. Just trying to get you thinking about what you could do in your classroom. Okay, we'll pause those. Another task is for you to perhaps think about some of the pupil work that is shown on this slide and think about how you could use that to develop language skills, but also link it across the curriculum. So if we've got a mobile here that was made, developing in technology, if you like, skills, in art, looking at different planets and creating a scene. And then again, a story was read to the pupils, and then they had to show their understanding of the story in this picture. So then how could we build on that? So could learners, for instance, write a story in English about this spaceship, but make it their own. And then could they maybe label some of these keywords in French if they know them? And if not, how could we develop their knowledge? How could we get them to be independent and learn those words? So have a wee pause of the video and have a discussion or a think about what you could do. I also think it's really important at this stage to start to bring in more and more of intercultural understanding or cultural appreciation. It's part of the expectations, but I think when we're learning the language of another country, it goes hand in hand with learning about the country. So simple to look at key facts, get learners to do some research, ask them to do a wee presentation, turn it into a quiz or a treasure hunt. Lots of different things you could do with that. And there's a lovely song that you could listen to help. Teach them some cultural playground games and get them to play them. Teach them some traditional French activities like boule for PE. Or there's a lovely little yoga video here linking with different landmarks in France which make different yoga postures or shapes. Think about how they celebrate different traditional festivals like Easter and Christmas. Are they similar? Are they different? And how? And, learners should still be enjoying listening to songs, stories and poems. So you could use traditional songs, stories and poems to do this. And I've put a couple in here for you. And then obviously you could look at manipulating them in different ways, getting children to join in or do some comprehension activities, or then create their own versions. And why not also try to get learners to make things that come from the country? So make an Eiffel Tower out of plasticine, out of straws, drawing it. So bringing it into other areas of the curriculum as well. Got some ideas here for Gaelic, so slightly different approach, but if you click on the links, you'll see some information and activities linked to the cultural heritage of Scotland, which is part and parcel of the appreciation of another country. Okay. Inevitably, we always need to include an element of assessing where children are in their learning and monitor and track their progress. So there's lots of ideas. If you click the first bullet point, it will take you to a link with lots of ideas for how you can celebrate language learning. And that will be day to day, or it could be at the end of a term, or it could be at the end of a year. It's really important that you know where your learners are at. Have they achieved first level? What elements do they need further progress in, for instance? And do the learners know where they're at? And then how do you build in transition? How do you share information with the next teacher, for instance? So here's an example of a monitoring and tracking document where the teacher can show what they've covered by traffic lighting it and pass it to the next teacher. And with the class can do a sort of an overview of where the class are at the end of a year. Or learners could look at this individually, by P4 if they're able to read, then they could have an online version and traffic light it themselves. It's great if we can start to get parents involved in supporting learners at home, getting them to learn a language with their children to support them. There's lots of different resources here for you which are free, different online courses which relate to what they're learning at school, and short videos. Also just having some fun at home, and this virtual classroom is excellent. It has the different elements, and you click on like the alphabet or the numbers and you'll see different animations so that you can learn with the children at home. Teachers could also set a little homework activity. A lot of schools have a grid sort of format. Maybe one of those elements could be French or Gaelic or whatever language is being taught. And I've got some examples here of possible activities that link in with the Power Language Schools platform. And lastly, there's some lovely little topic books here that could be used to consolidate work at home that's being done at school with little website links. So lots of different ways for you to explore and maybe, try them out. So there's loads of resources here to support you. Obviously, it depends on what you're using in your authority. And these are the different ones that I think are sort of generally used across the Northern Alliance. I would bring your awareness to Gaelic if you are teaching Gaelic and want resources. There's a fantastic Gaelic online course for teachers with different modules, with everything you need to teach learners, and all planning sheets for learners for their courses, linked to Go Gaelic that's there. So you can access that. If you click the link, it will take you to it. You do need to have a Glow login and password. Okay. If you want to further develop how you teach language or your own language skills, if you go to the Northern Alliance Teacher Professional Hub, you will see that there are tons of resources on there from our trainings with recorded materials and PowerPoints and videos. So there's something for everybody. These are some of my top tips. I would encourage you to share your own ideas and to think about what works for you in your classroom. I think the importance is to keep learners progressing not just repeating old stuff, but moving forward in their learning, engaging them, and making languages enjoyable, and really thinking about what works for you and your class and how they learn best. Embedding it in daily routines and linking across the curriculum so you don't feel like you're having to do something extra. If you want to look at the key documents, there's a variety here for you to look at. I would draw your attention to the fact that there are new partial E's and O's. So there are E's and O's now for P1. So those of you who are teaching P2 might want to have a look at those so you're aware of where learners should be at. And we also have progression framework, which is incredibly useful for breaking down the E's and O's into learning intentions and success criteria. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me, thea.palu@highland.gov.uk. And these next few slides just show the different support that's available across the Northern Alliance, some which are open to everybody and some which are open specifically to different authorities. So this is for Highland. Then we've got Aberdeenshire. Also notes the development officer, so if you've got any questions, you know who to contact. And Argyll and Bute. And that's it. I hope that helps you on your journey. And bonne chance. Au revoir.